Hey folks, this is Stoli and welcome to some more game dev. Coming back with Chapter 1 review and Polish Part 2. In the stream earlier today, we kind of went through the first part of Chapter 1, taking a lot of notes and then spending the second half of the stream, or most of the second half of the stream, focusing on trying to fix up and polish some of those small areas that I was critiquing, basically. And we're going to continue that here. So we're going to jump back in to the save file from where we were in the first part. We're not even that far in, to be honest, and we're just going to keep going through and finding spots where maybe audio is missing, where art needs to be improved, and seeing where that takes us. There is a couple of bugs that I definitely want to take a look at, but I want to start with just reviewing again. We'll open the video with like looking at where we're at and making some notes of more things we want to do, and then we'll start diving into it. Alright, so we had just finished doing a loop where we had gone all the way around to try and save the adventurer, but we were too late. We ended up picking up her mace and absorbing it with the Omni weapon, and we were about to do an attempt at saving her, essentially. So we can do this stab. And now that we have the mace, we're able to defeat this slime. We do take a fair amount of damage. Still not sure about this particular section. I feel like it could be refined. But again, we're going to get this out and get feedback from folks and then go from there. We are in a weird state. Why is there no adventurer? Interesting. We're going to debug end the run and see if maybe we just didn't hit a reset or something. Yeah, this is a filler cutscene. Let's get back out there. I can think of a potential issue of why this happened. I was messing around with the teleport, but no, that doesn't even make sense though. Yeah, interesting. I'm not sure why the adventurer wasn't spawning on that last run. Okay, so that's a bug I'm going to need to dig into. I'm going to guess that it wasn't properly resetting the flags when we ended the run through picking up the mace, because the mace pickup has like a special end of run moment that happens, and there must be some sort of issue with it. I'll have to check into that more. I'm not going to recreate that moment right this second. But I will make a note. Adventurer did not reset after mace pickup. So that's definitely a big bug, because that would really change the play experience for someone who doesn't know the intended flow. It would just suddenly feel like, well, something's broken. Drixie's also been giving feedback that that moment maybe makes her feel a little bit too mean. So we may want to look at some of the writing there, but I'm going to leave narrative stuff off, because I'm going to take that as a... I'm going to do that through spreadsheet and a more fine-tooth comb separately, is what I've kind of decided. We're more looking for audio mistakes or general broken parts of the gameplay. Okay, cool. I've added this extra cutscene recently that she basically tells you to go improve your skills if you try and talk to her to leave. So you do have to come in here and buy at least one skill point, which you are guaranteed to have one strength node through a cutscene, and you will be guaranteed to at least have leveled up Slash one time. So I'm pretty positive that you can't get soft locked here, although it's very possible I am missing something. Regardless though, after you've purchased 1 skill point, then she'll let you leave. Okay. The other thing worth calling out is at the end of last stream, I was working on trying to get these fades on the edge of the map. I have done that completely now, so there is a system in place so that all of those are correctly showing up based off of the correct orientation, and I've gone through every map and updated it so that they all have the correct data for the fades. Cool. Is the adventurer here now? Yes, okay. So something is wrong there. Boar animation glitch on first map load. There was a little bit of a flicker. I'd like to see if we can figure out what's going on with that. No interact here for the sword, and we can walk over where the sword was. This all is in a good state. Now that we have the mace and we can knock over the logs, we can come down here and gain access to this little island. Pick up a couple more crystals. Don't think these slimes should really be able to take us out. I guess in the next room with the double slimes, if we get both of them attacking us at the same time, we could potentially die on this run, but seems unlikely. See if we can bring it over this way so it's at least a little further away. Actually, we might die here. Yeah, I think we will. Unfortunate. Okay. We might want to retune some stuff a little bit and maybe give the mini slimes a little bit less attack. Because I definitely don't want the player dying there, and if I accidentally died, then it's very likely someone who isn't familiar with the gameplay could very much get into a real broken state. Right, I don't have any power nodes here yet, but I can buy a HP node at least. Maybe it's not the biggest deal, because if you do die there, you're likely to get another upgrade. And then the HP should help you. Just got to be a little bit concerned about how often we have the player die and have to replay sections, because I do think it's going to potentially get grueling if we're not too careful with the pacing. Yeah, and the adventurer's fine here again. Okay, there must have been some problem with the reset on mace pickup. Okay, no difficulties here. And then this is the only other path that the player can take. They can explore all they want, but they will need to find this sparkly log, hopefully with this sparkle indicator. And the fact that we kind of force you to knock over the first log to try and save the adventurer, this path won't be too hidden. We have also made it so that you can't skip this checkpoint unlock. If you try and walk past it without interacting, it will take you back. Trixie is working on a new version of the goddess statue that will be able to animate so that it'll be in a broken state, and then I might make Hero walk around here a little bit and grab something off the ground and then bring it to the statue to repair it, just to kind of indicate this idea of like finding something. I don't want the player to have to do a whole bunch of work to get the second checkpoint, but just to tutorialize the idea of like fixing the checkpoints is something I want to teach here, I think. Yeah, it's still too weak to take on that slime. Oh, I guess one thing worth noting is chest next to Goddess, I should say checkpoint 2, is easily missed. I'd like to fix that. I made it too hidden in the grass. I picked it up just now, but I think it's just a little too hidden. Buy a few more upgrades in here. We'll go south on that tree. Now we've unlocked the checkpoint screen for the first time. This is another big one that I think we already have noted over here, but I'm gonna just copy it into here so it's easier for me to read it all in one section. But we want to update the positions on this map. Right now these positions are off over here in the clouds. I'd like to position these 2 checkpoints somewhere in here, as well as maybe hiding the other buttons. There is actually only 3 checkpoints right now in Chapter 1, so we should definitely get rid of the 4th button at the very least. So then we can go to the Northern Trail. We also unlocked this call button, which I just added. Oh, there's a bug here. It is not updating the confirmation. 2 button confirmation menu off screen when calling. I think that's because we interacted with the skill screen and that's moving it to some spot below, like off camera, and it needs to be moved back. But the idea with the call screen is when you bring up the call screen, which you can't see it because it's off camera right now, it's just a 2-button prompt which says end run, yes, no. And I'm going to be using that to give the player an option after you've unlocked the second checkpoint to end a run whenever you want. And I think that's going to be a pretty important aspect of this as the player starts to explore and maybe wants to go back to a certain checkpoint more easily. Not sure about the pickup sound effect. It's feeling a little too sharp, is the way I would describe it. Too tinny is maybe another thought, but I tried using a kind of glass sound effect for like the crystal pickups, but I don't know if it's really working the way I wanted it to. Let's see if I can get past this bat and pick up some more crystals, because I think it's going to end up defeating me here. And this is where a bit of the like upgrade, do a run is going to start coming in to play a lot more. Can we buy? Yeah, we have the stagger. This screen still needs another overhaul. We did a recent update of this. It's still not working. It's still, like, now we have all the appropriate information visible, but it's just too much. It's just overwhelming. Okay, spent all our skill points. I'm going to continue trying to go north rather than south on this run, because I do want to see how that's feeling. When you go south, you end up finding the staff, which unlocks a magic attack, which is very effective versus the bats. But you should still be able to go up this way. It just might require upgrading a couple of times. Yeah, because the amount of slashes you need to stagger is just much higher versus the bat compared to its magic. And I mean, there I was doing some complicated override stuff, which I'm not expecting a player to be able to figure out early on here. But I essentially attacked where the bat was going to be, opposed to where it actually is. Kind of preemptively triggering an attack. All the fades look to be correct. I'm not seeing any missing so far, so I think I got all of those updated. Oh, this bat's in a broken state. Oh, it figured itself out, but it was definitely struggling to figure out what action to take for a little bit there. Gonna try taking out the mini slime first. And then I could run at this point, but we might be able to defeat this bat. I just want to see. Yeah, it's going to hit us down a lot before we get the stagger. Oh, no, just barely. 1 HP. So given some random chance, there's a good possibility that with some plus minus, most of the damage is like plus or minus 10% random, that we could have died there. This whole cutscene needs to be reworked. I think it's just too frantic. A lot of the dialogue feels too frantic in general, to be honest. And doesn't do a good job of explaining what your next steps are. Okay. Stop taking notes at some point, but I think we're like, most of that's fine. Like, again, I think that narratively, the finding Takashi is kind of a letdown as a cutscene. It's very brief, and it's like your first time really finding the other adventurers, and I feel like it should be less of a, hey, get out of here, go find this person, and more of a like exposition dump, while also kind of being a more interesting cutscene, like having the characters move around and chat and like talk to each other in a way that could feel more natural. Beyond that, though, I'm fine with most of the tuning so far. I think combat-wise, I'm actually quite happy. It's more narrative stuff that I'd like to really refine. Yeah, this is still busted. Okay, let's see if we can fix the 2-button confirmation. Let's start with this and start digging into some of these bugs. Because I don't want to go too much further, because again, I'd like to be able to get some codes out and have people play the whole thing themselves and then give me feedback based off them playing, not necessarily showing the whole chapter 1 in a video. So let's take a look at some of these issues. 2-button confirmation. So where are we modifying the position of that? It's not going to be in the cutscenes. It's going to be in screen transitions. And probably in skill. Yeah, so we're moving it from 0 to negative 540, but when we close it, we don't do the inverse, and I think we need to. So if we go UI, what is this? Just a move to position? Yeah, UI, translate, yeah, move to position. This is going to be moving the 2-button confirmation components, and I think we're just moving it back to 0, 0, and we'll see if that works. I think it's just that simple. And we will reload that save. We should also make another permanent save in case we accidentally overwrite our autosave. And we want to go back to this particular moment in time. So this should take care of the 2-button confirmation. The... The checkpoints should be this sheet in Excel. I'll bring this over in a second. Continue, autosave, yes. Let's move this back over here. So if we hit end run is now on the left over here. Why is that in the middle of the screen by default? I think it's calling this one open from load button. Let's take a look at this screen transition, which honestly, maybe this is just where we need to be updating it in the first place, but we are currently in combat and we are doing combat ability select to 2-button. Yeah, that should just be doing this. So that would imply that this is by default in this position. Okay, let's just try ending the run. I'm gonna come into here. I'm gonna bring up the dialogue. Have to do it on an unpurchased node. Then we'll go back in and then see if the dialogue is in the correct spot. Yes, it is in the center of the screen, which is what I would expect. So then it must be by default in the center of the screen, which is not what I intend. Let's go to UI. Let's take a look at the UI front end screens, 2-button dialogue, components. No. Oh, no, this makes sense. We loaded through the load menu. So it hit this move, but didn't put it back. I think what I want to do is this is kind of the default open. I think this default open should be just doing a UI update itself. So that when we by default open this, it should just go to 0, 0. I think that'll solve most of our problems. As long as the transition from ability select to 2-button confirmation is using this sequence. I should double check that. So under combat, screen transitions, Yeah, it's using this default open one. Okay, so now if we come into continue, continue from our autosave. We should see it display in the center when we do... Yeah, okay, cool. So now the dialogue is showing up in the correct spot. And no matter where we open it from now, it by default should be resetting it to the middle. And if we want to have it go to a different spot on that particular screen transition, we can build a custom one for it. Cool. So let's say that's fixed. Let's then fix the update checkpoints position on the map. So I'm going to end the run so that our autosave is in the Goddess Realm, so that we can more easily get to the checkpoint screen. And then in here, this should be the checkpoint data that we're currently using. So we don't need 3. This can become dungeon entrance. And this will eventually be... Have I not hooked that up? Actually, that's interesting too in and of itself. We haven't hooked up checkpoint 3 yet. So that'll be in F5. So this will be opening this room. I'm going to leave the checkpoint IDs alone because I'm not sure what implications that has by changing those. Yeah, and then we'll download this off camera to the side over here. I'm going to download the checkpoint flags. And then in here we can do parse. Where do we parse these? It's not flag. Oh, unless it is. I'll try that. Let's see what happens. So we'll go to our JSON files and see if the checkpoint flag data has been updated correctly. And it has. Next, we need to modify these positions. So let's try and figure that out. I guess I kind of need a base modification. So let's move this one to, like, say 300 and see where that ends up. I'm going to guess these are just positions on the map. We could potentially just move the markers in the scene and then figure out what locations they're at and then copy that into our data. That might be pretty straightforward. Let's see here. Unlockable characters with the hydration. Appreciate it. Okay, so that's still not far enough to the left. And it needs to go down a bit too. So if we go 2D mode, let's turn off the visibility of everything in the Goddess Realm so we can see the 2D information here. So that is the checkpoint. So that is the locator. Yeah, okay, so this position does match. So then if we go back into game view, so yeah, now we can use this as a position indicator. So we're going to want these checkpoints somewhere like, I don't know, somewhere like here. So that's 188. We could say 190 for fun. So we'll change that inside of, we're just going to edit the JSON file directly. So 190, and then a position of negative 350 approximately. Let's do negative 340. Negative 340. And then for the final one in F5, that's essentially directly north on the map. So we could just try something like, honestly, that might just work. Let's see if we can line that up in here to get an idea. So 190 would put it about there. The cursor doesn't know that the positions have been updated. Okay, so we'll have to import the data to get a real feel for this. So then in here, this one will be somewhere. I don't know, like this. This is a kind of rough interpretation. This was built before we built the whole forest scene, so it doesn't really match up exactly. And it ends up being a very small section. Trixie and I have been talking about maybe redoing this whole screen, but at the very least for now, I want to get it better representing the positions, even if it's going to end up changing. So let's go with this. So we'll go with 230 and negative 335. Yeah, let's do that. And then I'll also update the spreadsheet over here off camera as well, real quick. 190, 340, 230. Just so I don't have to re-import for something so small. We'll just update it in both the JSON and in the TSV form, so that they're in sync. Okay, cool. So let's say that's good. Move this away. And then Trixie redeemed a change music, which is tricky because today I'm not actually doing background music. I'm trying to use the in-game audio. So you have thrown me. Because normally we just kind of pick a piece of music and just let it play in the back. Because we're trying to polish and test things, I'm trying to get as much of the in-game audio as possible. So for today, I will revoke or I will reject, so you get your channel points back. Okay. Continue, autosave. Let's see if those checkpoint locations are feeling better now. I guess the problem with having it directly above is that the cursor kind of intercepts it. Okay, so we'll have to move this one a bit to the left, even though it wouldn't really make sense. Let's try, what is this one? This one's at 230. So that means that this is a 40 pixel gap. Probably get away with something as simple as like 170 or even 165. See how that feels. Okay, so that'll fix up the checkpoints. What else we got? I'm going to preemptively say that's fixed. Chest next to checkpoint 2 is easily missed. Okay, I'm going to move that out. Or maybe we leave it in the same spot, but we just get rid of the grass around it. That might be the easier approach. We might want to close and reopen Unity at this point too. I feel like a simple opening or start and stop is taking 30 seconds, which usually is an indication that I need to close and reopen the editor. So we'll do that after this as well. And I think I'm not sure if I really want to fix some of these other ones on camera. There are definitely notes that I do want to fix. Yeah, that'll do. Okay. At least the checkpoints are on the forest now. Yeah, so of these remaining ones, Adventure did not reset. Is going to be a bit trickier for me to test. It's going to take a bit of back and forth. I don't feel like doing that on camera right now. Boar animation glitches on first map load. We could try and figure out what's going on with that. So if we go to G7 and make sure that we have debug load all turned on, and then hit play, can I see this issue here? Yeah, this should not be taking this long to load. Okay, we're going to fix that. We're going to close and reopen Unity real fast. In the meantime, yeah, I'm just going to stop. Just stop. Unity, please stop. Fantastic. Okay. And then real quick, just relaunch everything. Okay. Other major thing. Wow, that was very white. It was just very blinding as Unity loaded back in. Beyond the animation glitch, the other big thing is the side of the tiles is a task that I'd like to try and work on this evening. These areas here are all this kind of like green brick texture, which we've been using for a long time, and I've kind of like zoned it out, but we'd like to be able to have this be editable, so you can potentially imagine that this might be like a dirt texture along the edge of the water, whereas over here it might be like maybe a fade into darkness or something. I'm not sure. Drixie's going to do a pass, but I need to build a system so that they can be edited, and then we will figure out what it looks like once we can actually modify it. I want to come in from the south, and then we're going to change this to be post slime fight will be a good preset to use. And we're checking to see whether or not the slime, or the boar, it does a glitch when we first load in. It does. Okay, so what is going on? So if we hit play and then pause, we should be able to click on the boar as everything's loading in. Click on the boar, bring down the animator. Looks like the boar starts in southeast idle, which I think is correct. We're going to go frame by frame. Still in southeast idle. That's good. This is all fine. Character loads in. Oh, they're okay. The one frame glitch or something is very quick. I thought I could hit unpause and be able to catch what was happening, but I could not. Okay, gonna make sure we reselect the boar. Yep, still loading in fine. Still just playing southeast idle. That's all good. Is it when it gets to the end of this frame? Still in southeast idle. Oh, went northwest. Then northeast. Then southwest. Then southeast. I know what's happening. It's searching for the player. Wild. Okay. So when enemies are revealed on a tile, they look around to see if they can spot the player. I do have a bug called out for this as well. So we could try and tackle both of these issues. After spotting the player, the enemies aren't facing the player anymore. It used to be that when they spotted the player, they would stop in the facing where they saw the player, but now they seem to continue rotating until they reach the final rotation. I wonder if this is all related. Okay, we'll do a little bit of a look. At the very least, this boar should not be doing that search when it loads in. Because it's not on a tile that was revealed by the player, it's just part of the board. Okay, let's try and figure it out. It's also possible this is because of the debug. The debug spawn all is maybe creating this bad scenario. So we should check to see whether or not this is happening in a normal save file as like a first step, because I don't want to run down a bug that might just be only in debug state. So we're going to load the Goddess Realm, or minimize this down for now. We're going to go to checkpoint 1 and then walk our way over to that scene, which should have been loaded up naturally. We can also check to see if this slime is doing the same thing. It does. It's very quick and less noticeable because its shape is relatively round, whereas the boar's shape is kind of, it changes more. But I could see the eyes on the slime move quickly. Yeah, it's already over. But it is still loading in and doing that look. We should have an autosave now at least that's right in this room, so we can load up this autosave. I suppose we should go look at the actual code. Where would this be? Visibility, potentially? Spot ability, yes. Okay, so this is getting played as part of the tile reveal. I guess it's always done this, but it was way less noticeable until we had the boar appear, because the boar's shape changes so much when it appears on camera that you can see the flicker even though it's so fast. Your eye picks it up easier. But I think this has always been a problem based off this code, because it doesn't really matter how we reveal the unit. This is all just part of revealing. And so when we reveal, we will call reveal alert unit, and then that will go into the visibility of that unit. And as long as it has a spot ability, which right now all enemies do, it will try to perform it at the end of the turn. Let's take a look at the actual ability itself. So if we go into abilities and look at, I'm going to guess, alert. What does this do? Oh, that doesn't seem right. Let's double check this. Oh yeah, that is all it does. So all the alert ability does is try to show the alert icon and potentially play the sound effect. So this isn't happening. We're not seeing this. So it's not the alert that's playing. It's the spot. Yeah, I just misread. Okay. So it is the spot ability, which is this one here. Yeah, okay. So this is doing a bunch of things. It's setting the property of spotted to 0, so it's saying it hasn't spotted anything. And then it does a unit sight effect where it is looking in front of itself, basically, and then it adjusts its facing and looks in a different direction, then waits half a second, adjusts facing again, adjusts facing again, and then finally adjusts facing back. And if any point one of these sets spotted to true, it should stop going into any of these other ones, and it shouldn't adjust facing any further. Yeah, if spotting is ever... Basically, if it's ever 1 for true, then it'll stop entering into these other effects. So I guess what is the functionality we're looking for? Is it that we don't want to see the enemy turning? Because that happens so fast. I feel like at one point I probably had built this with the intent that you would see the enemy looking around. Oh yeah, these delays have been set to 0. So yeah, there's like maybe a 1 frame delay between each of the changes. So at some point these were like a half-second turns, but I probably felt like that was too slow to watch the unit look around every single time. So I made it instantaneous. But you still see it. I think these can be empty now. These can be empty ability effects that just have this conditional property. Because if we do it this way, we won't have a 1-frame delay, because the delay ability effect, even if it has a delay of 0, I think still takes a frame. Yeah, because it'll yield weight. I guess the other option is we could do if delay is greater than 0. That way we don't have to go re-edit all of these. Sure, let's make that modification. So then that'll also help get away from the 1-frame delay. Let's see if that fixes it. Because instead of being like turn, look in a direction, wait a frame, turn, look in a direction, wait a frame, it should in 1 frame change all the facings very quickly and then return to its original facing all before you see the animator update once. This won't fix whatever's going on with the enemy not facing the player correctly. We'll also need to look into that separately, because I don't see why this would be broken in that way currently. I did not see it flip. Try again. Loading in, we're going to select the boar so that we can see what it's doing here. We're going to mostly be watching this direction parameter, and then we're going to go frame by frame. I think it should have happened already, because it was happening as Hero was walking into the scene. Yeah, so I think that fixes it. Just getting rid of the 1-frame delay by having a delay 0 has fixed the issue. Now let's see if we can figure out what's going on with the enemy revealing and not facing the correct way. So if we go to, say, J8 as reference, this map has an enemy that should be relatively easy to spot from within the fog. Right. So in this situation, the enemy was alerted, we saw the alert symbol, but it's currently facing this way. So it did not change its facing and leave its facing in this direction. Oh, we left this commented out. Okay, everything I just checked with the boars needs a recheck. Because just having that commented out may be enough to have ruined our testing. I think it should still be fine, but that line was essentially what was actually changing the facing of the character. Still looked okay though. Try that one more time. And then we'll go back to checking the slime. Okay, my instincts are still right. It's still fixed regardless. Okay, let's go check here now. See if I can recreate the issue with it facing the wrong way. I think we just need to walk straight. Yeah, so it's still not looking this way. Let's add a breakpoint here to start with. And I'm also going to take a look at I'm going to take a look at wherever it's actually setting spotted. Inside of here, unit site effect. Oh, we commented out the set property here. Interesting. I feel like we did that because of some code we were doing with spotting enemies, but I don't think it should have been commented out for when the enemies are spotting the player. Only when the enemies are spotting another enemy, I think. But that's definitely the issue, is we're just not setting spotted anymore. That's the breakpoint I said. I'm just going to turn it off for now. Yeah, now it's facing the player. Okay. So we turned off the thing that was setting it, which means that it just wasn't weird. Okay, so that's that bug. So we have fixed the enemy no longer facing the player anymore, and we have fixed the boar glitch, which was really all enemies glitching, aka looking around for one frame. Ch.2's chest is easy to miss. Let's fix that real quick. And then I think we're going to finally get to the side panels of the floors. So in here, I think the grass is just the major problem here. We're going to delete the sound effect because we're going to get rid of it. And then we're going to change this from grass to none. And then clear and clear. Hopefully that makes that easier to spot. Although it may still be too hidden. But this is an important one for the player because it gives the stagger nodes, which the player definitely will need to progress through the skill trees. So if it's missed, it will be a problem. Okay. And that's all I need to do for that. This one's a big deal. That's a big bug. If this is reliably broken, honestly, it'd be worse if it's inconsistent, because then I'm gonna have a harder time fixing it. I'm gonna check it again one more time here, but if we go continue and then do this save file. Actually, I want to save our current progress. Save, and then this was, yeah, this is a month old, so we'll keep these first two. So we've got a save of our current autosave. Now we can go back, and I want to check on the first save file and double. I want to just validate that it is in that busted state where the adventurer isn't resetting properly. Did I load the wrong one? Or did I overwrite the original broken one at some point when I wasn't thinking about it? Yeah, it looks like I saved over this one a little while ago. About 10 minutes ago? Okay, well, I still think this is going to be a pain to figure out, and I don't want to do it on camera. So I am going to instead focus on trying to figure out how we can change the textures on the side of the floors. So if we look at the Goddess Realm already has different floor edges. Is that just because we use a different tile? Yeah, like this is not the same green edge here. Why? Yeah, it uses Goddess Realm floor. Okay, and that just has a floor face where the material it's using is just these two different trims. Okay. So we just need to swap these at runtime. So if we go back into, say, I6, very simple, very small map. It's currently loading base floor tile. Okay. Inside of here, it just has defaulted textures, similar to the Goddess Realm one. Oh, this one has a little bit of gray to kind of tint it to be more shadowed on one side. How do we currently load the texture? Because we update the top of the tiles with the floor texture. Where does that happen? Does this have a reference? Has a reference to floor model. How is that being used? Floor model. This one. Get mesh renderer, and it is grabbing material 0, which is the first one, and then modifying it. Okay, that's great. So material 1 and 2 are the other ones. So if we just go into here, how does it figure out the texture it wants to use though? Floor texture, where does this come from? Floor texture. It gets loaded in as part of loading the tile, which gets loaded before the board. Right, which... We load the texture as part of loading the room before we even load the board. All right. That's fine. We can steal this piece of logic. And I think we can do this per tile because the addressable system should be smart enough to not do the load every time, but see that it's already been loaded and let it be quicker the next time we try. So if we do that configure floor, and then at the bottom of this function, we try to load. Well, let's just test it. So if we give a, where'd Unity go? If we come into here and we find the Goddess Realm texture, which we know is set up to work as a side piece, it will fit the material correctly. If we can find it. Where is it? This one. Okay. So if we give this an addressable ID, and we'll just call this Goddess Realm floor trim, and we'll give this one Goddess Realm floor trim underscore R, and then we try loading that here. And then instead of run load sequence, we need to make a similar function. Can I do this in place? Oh, perfect. Oh, this has to be done through a task setup. But this would be a way of loading into the texture. This is for a sprite, but still could use that as a template. Set icon image. Oh, neat. Yeah, I have not used some of this code in a long time, but we could use that. So what if we grab that as reference? How does this work? So this gives a image name. In our context, we'd probably want to pass in a material as well. Material. And then we do material dot set texture. And we'd want to set whatever we need to figure out what the layer name is going to be. So if we look at this one, I guess that's going to be base map. Like that. This is loading a sprite. We need to load a texture instead. That's a pretty easy change. This looks like it would work. It is upset that I don't have the concept of threading. Actually, rather than do it that way, I think I want to inline. Fully qualify. Yeah, let's try that. And then instead of whatever this was doing, we can do mesh render material 1 here. And then we can just repeat this for underscore R and material 2. And then that looks somewhat slick. Does it work? I don't know, but we can definitely try. We'll need to actually update the data based off of each tile to decide which texture it should use. So now if we load into this one, every tile should use the marble, because every single tile will just by default load the marble texture. And that just worked. Okay. I do want to check to see if it is using the correct left-right. So this one is pointing to... I got them backwards, not a big deal. But it's 2.1. That's the only issue there. So we want to load the right trim first. And this function has access to the core tile data, which is basically all the information about a tile. So inside of here, we would just need to add information for whether or not this has custom addressable ID for the side of a tile. So we can basically copy this and then floor, edge, and then we don't need floor edge addressable ID, and then floor edge right addressable ID. Just to make it slightly more readable. And then if we go backwards to the tile, we just need to do a if unlockable characters with the hydration 10 minutes ago. Missed it because I'm focused. But still very much appreciate it. Okay, so then in here, we can just do tile data dot edge addressable. We want the right version, and we'll do string dot is null or empty, and make sure that it is not null or empty before we use it. And then the exact same setup here for the left version, essentially. So then it's just a matter of populating that data, which is going to come from our generate. I don't remember the exact name of it, and we have a couple variations. So we're just going to come into here, edit script. So inside of this area, we should have a prop tile that we look through. Interact tile, pathing, prop tile. We could make a custom tile for this, which we do from time to time for different types of data. We do tend to add like the spawn points or the transitions or audio effects, but I do feel like this to me feels like it's in the same realm of a prop tile, because we're changing essentially the edges, but it's how this tile specifically looks. So I think adding 2 more drop downs in here for edges, essentially, it makes this thing that is already relatively long a bit longer. I think it'll be fine. Yeah, so let's start here. So inside of this, it has a number of drop downs. Let's start with the editor window. I think that might be the fastest way to do this. So if we look for editor, prop tile editor, scroll down till we find label walls. I'm going to add a new section in here. I'm going to copy the spacing. We're going to put that at the bottom. We're going to call this edges. And then we're going to copy left and right walls, and we're going to make a right edge, and a left edge option. Okay. And then in here, I'm going to copy these. And we're going to set the right edge option and the left edge option. These aren't going to be prop loaders is the weird thing. So instead of finding property prop loader, I think we are just going to find well, what does a prop loader have? Yeah, it has information about the addressable ID. What does it look like if we repurpose it? What if we do just have a right edge prop loader and a left edge prop loader so that it operates exactly the same? It'll just have a lot of information we don't care about. So right and left, option index, that's all good. This becomes left edge, right edge, and right edge. And the options that you would be able to choose from would just be from the props. It's a little weird because I don't think all props will want to be usable on the edge of a thing, but you could do it. You could totally grab a texture and use it. There'll just be restrictions. Like you have to make sure that it is the correct dimensions, essentially. Yeah, I think this is fine. Let's double check to see if we're missing any setup here. So if we're using the left wall as reference, it's basically as simple as that, it looks like. Nothing else? Yeah, okay. So let's assume that that's right. And then presets, right wall, left wall. What is that preset even doing? It just determines some positional information about where the left and right depth is. That won't matter in this case. So this is where it gets a little different. So if we find that the right edge is set, instead of adding a prop loader data, I think instead we want to set whatever that prop loader's addressable ID was. This way of doing it down here. So this becomes right edge addressable, right edge prop loader dot prop addressable ID, and then left edge, and this becomes the default. I'm going to make a judgment call. Even though I don't do this in the materials, I'm going to actually give this a proper name. Yeah, I like that more. Okay. Also, interestingly, that all of this just goes into the prop loader list. Does that mean that all of these are just completely unused at this point then? I could probably do a cleanup and remove all of these extra strings. Like, what is this used for? It's not used anywhere. What about this one? No references. Oh, okay. So at some point I fixed this up and made it so that all of the different prop loaders are just going into a list of prop datas. I kind of refactored it, and I did not bother to clean up all of these dead string values. Neat. Yeah, I think all of this has been replaced with the prop loader. So I think all of this can go, because it's all essentially inside this list now, except for these two. So I'm going to actually just move these down. This one's still used. Content object. What is a content object? Weird. Okay. Yeah, I think this whole core tile data probably could use a pass, because I think this is also dead code too. I don't think a content object is a thing anymore. I think this is an even older version of a prop, essentially. Wild. Yeah, I want to put like a debug error in here and see if we ever even get into this section. Yeah, I think the prop system completely overwrote this, and it's just not used anymore. Still, I want to double check that before just removing things willy-nilly. Right, so now we should see a drop down in here, which allows me to set everything and anything as a texture to the side of an edge. So this one here should have a blue bush as the left edge and a farm fence as the right edge, which technically there's no reason that shouldn't work. It just will look awful. Like, it should function that you can change and add that as the texture edge. Oh, it didn't work. Did I not hit save? Maybe I didn't hit save. Or none of this works. Interesting. Now, this is the only one using the Goddess Realm. Configure floor. Oh, because we're not actually using this value. So if we come into here, put this in here, come into here, put this in here, now we should see something awful. I think it's going to mostly be black because it's a transparent sprite that we're choosing to use as the edge. Oh, weird. Oh, did it fail to load? Invalid key. Interesting. I'm curious to see what it actually ended up trying to use, because that seems to be indicating it tried to use Ch.1, which is definitely not what we set. So I guess we should also check to see what it's actually doing inside of the save system. Let's go back a bit. We were messing around and looking at stuff, but here we should be able to see some information as well. So if we hit, well, we got to move something slightly so Unity lets me save. And then here, we won't get into... We don't care about every time we hit the if statement. We care about when we get into this section. Ah, interesting. Yeah, so it thinks it's prop addressable ID tree. So it didn't actually update the information correctly. Okay, so I'm going to guess we need to do something else in here. Is there like an update call that needs to be... Yeah, I guess we didn't check here to see what this was doing with the left and right wall props. Yeah, we need to do the same thing here. Yeah, what is this load doing? Yeah, so we have to call load in order for it to update the IDs. But I don't want to actually load the object. So we're going to need to write some special logic for these, which is the problem with trying to use it for an unintended purpose, is that we're going to end up having to hack the prop loader a bit in order to get it to function for this secondary purpose. Okay, anywhere else this is used? Yes. We also need to say that it is set if one of these edges are set. Left edge, right edge. For consistency, I'm going to just flip that though. Okay, so then anywhere else this is used? No, it's just used for checking if it's been set, adjusting the indices after populating new props, and as part of the load. So inside of the load, we do need to check to see if any of these values have changed. And if they have, we want to destroy the object that we've generated, set a bunch of values, and then addressably load this so that we can see it in editor window that the prop has been updated. I think what I want to do is just add a private variable here. Yeah, hide an inspector. We'll make it public. We'll make this a bool that is by default false in all situations, but we'll call this disable load, and that will be used if we don't see a string, or if the string is clear, or if the index is 0, or if disable load, then we stop here. Okay, I think that'll do it. So then we just need to make sure that we're setting that. Disable load equals true for specifically the edges. Not too much of a hack. Yeah, see, it tried to load those, which I did not want it to do. All right, so if I hit save, it is now sending the information, except we didn't copy, or we didn't change the copied name of the loader. Okay, small bugs, copy and paste issues. We're getting close. This is going to work in a second. I'm very excited. Because if this does just work, then Drixie can just create new props, put them in like an edge folder inside of the prop section, and then just set them the same way that she's been doing for all the other props. So this does feel like it's going to be consistent. So we're going to change this to like flowers, and we'll change this to like steel chest just to see if it updates. We hit a breakpoint. Actually, that's a good idea. Let's validate that this is being set. So we have set right to steel chest, and we've set left to white flowers. Seems good. And then we're going to make sure that we have a breakpoint inside the tile itself to see what it's loading into these material locations. So we'll hit play here. And it's loading steel chest, and it's loading flowers. That seems fine, but it did complain. Because it did not find a texture with that addressable ID. Because these are not textures, these are sprites. Does that really matter? You're telling me this is... No, this is still just a sprite. Right? Yeah, this is a sprite. So why... You're saying you failed to find an asset Yeah, no, I get it. I see it now. Yeah, no, these... The things we load are not sprites. The things we load are prefabs, which then happen to have those sprites in the sprite renderer location. We do not save the props as... We do not save the sprites, the props as sprites or as textures. All of these have no addressable IDs. The thing that we put an addressable ID on is the prefab. So when we're loading those IDs, which we normally set in here, we're loading a prefab that uses that texture. So if we want to put the addressable ID directly on the texture, that's going to be a different problem. Okay. What if we just hack it? Back to the drawing board. If instead of doing this, where do we load the props? Load addressable with prop ID, callback. What if we just decided to be awful? Load the object. We don't care about the animator. We don't care about the visibility. We don't care about setting any of this information. What if we just cared about stealing the sprite that's set on the sprite renderer? How terribly would this work? How mad would it be? Yeah, cannot convert sprite to texture. Yeah, okay, so this is a bad idea anyways, because we're loading the whole prefab when we only really care about the texture anyways. I just wanted to see if I could hack it. We were so close. I just didn't think about the fact that we're loading a prefab instead. Okay, so then what we need to do then is we need to modify our system slightly. So under props, we're going to go into global. We're going to make a new folder in here, and we're going to call it edge. Folder edge. Inside of that edge folder, we're going to add these two. What did you just do? You added them down here. Not helpful. No, it still has the folder selected as well. Okay, delete those two PNGs. Thank you. Then we're going to copy the PNGs again. When we finally get back up to the top, we're going to copy these two. We're going to copy them into this folder called Edge, paste it in here. We're going to name this Marble L and Marble R. Then we're going to modify our sprite processor. Sprite processor. Anim sprite processor. You're not the one I'm looking for, I don't think. Maybe you are? Slice sprites. No, this is not it. Sprite to prop. Sprite to prop. Okay, so in here we do a bunch of work, but we have a create prop folder. This is going to go through all the folders. It's going to parse them all. It's going to get a bunch of IDs. It's going to add that prop data, which is doing something, which is updating the JSON file with that prop, which is necessary for it to show up in our map editor. So we do need to do that. What is this doing? Default generation. This is creating all of our folder structures. If sprite contains work in progress, then do not create a prop for it. Yeah, I think this is the spot I want to modify. Where do we assign an addressable ID? Here, a set addressable ID. Okay, so we want to check source file. And this might be a bit extreme, but we're going to check to see if the source file, which is basically the entire path to the folder, if it contains the word edge, which again may be too specific. We might need to find a way to differentiate it. I'm going to add a Z to it, so we're going to call this folder edges with a Z. And hopefully Drixie never makes a similar folder, because it will break things. But we're going to check to see if it contains a file path. With that specific name. If it does, we'll continue. And then inside of where we assign a addressable ID, we're going to want to do something similar for the sprite. So this is where we've loaded the sprite value. So we should also be able to do if source file contains edges, then we want to do sprite dot addressable ID, and that addressable ID will need to be something specific. What do we normally do? We normally put together the path okay, which is this sprite name, essentially, once it's been modified a little bit. But we essentially do this. So if we steal it, what does it complain about up here? So if instead of prop path we use sprite path, what do we end up here? What is the ID that you end up using with this code? It's not seeing any errors, so it should just work. It's just whether or not it ends up with something I think is going to be usable is a different question. We might need to tack something onto it. So if we come into here and do global create props, what is the addressable name you ended up with? Global edges marble l.png. And that's because it didn't get rid of the PNG from the name like it does here. Okay. It does that twice for two different objects. So that'll be this one and this one. Out of curiosity, can we see those now in here? Let's clear all the errors. We're going to need to populate. It has global. There was a lot of other edits. I do not see edges. I'm going to guess that's because we didn't create a prop. And this system no, it should have been in the No, it didn't make it. How does it populate this list? It comes from the JSON file for all the props. Where did that JSON file get updated? I thought I left that in. Oh, it gets updated here based off the returned IDs. So where do these IDs get updated? IDs. It gets added down here. And this comes back with the addressable ID. Okay, so then we should just be able to make this work by doing this, so that the addressable ID for the sprite, which won't create a prop, but will add it to the prop list. This is super hacky. I don't know if this is really a good idea. I feel like I'm going to run into so many issues in the long run. But at the same time, it feels like modifying this system so that the edges can just appear here does seem like a good idea. Because it just reuses an existing system and feels in line with the way that we edit and modify our tiles normally. Okay, let's hit create props again. Now it should add the ID to the list of IDs. Yeah, and now that it's part of the JSON file, it should show up here when I hit populate, and there were 2 more entries added. Here, edges left and right, which now means we should be able to come in here and do edges left and edges right. We can hit save on that. It's going to save out those addressable IDs, which should be for textures, not props, which means we can use them when we load. So we come into here. We are now showing the marble. And now to make sure that this is working correctly, I would like to make a different set. There's a bunch of safeguards that I'm going to need to create. Like, what happens if I come into here and I choose to load left or right edge in a normal like prop? It's going to completely break because it's going to try and load an edge texture as a prefab, and that's going to have the opposite problem. So it's likely what I want to do is what I'm doing here, but make it so that maybe there's a separate JSON file for edges versus props, but they're still populated into these lists somehow. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I could use some string checking, but that also feels kind of terrible. Let's just make sure that this is working with another set of textures. So if we open this left and right, let's load our default palette and grab a light color and just make the whole thing a dark color, and then we use some sort of brown like this, I think. That might be a little too bright. But if we just try and gradient it down, how does that look? So let's save as, and we'll call this dirt gradient. And then if we create props out of global, it's hitting breakpoints. We can just hit stop debugging. I think it's working well enough at this point. And then we can come into here. We can change this to edges. Oh, I need to repopulate options. Edges, dirt gradient, edges, dirt gradient. I don't have a left and right with different like levels, but let's just see what this looks like. It should load up both sides with that texture now. Yep. Yeah, this top color was way too bright. But that's working. There's a bunch of safeguards that I need to create in order to make it so that you can't accidentally load one of these things as a prop. But I do like this idea of the edges being part of the prop tiles, so that if you want, you could come in and make a bunch of these into like a different type of edge. But ideally, there's still like a default edge that we use most of the time because that'll save on memory. So right now we're using this green one still consistently, but we could also just go into the base one and edit it to use some sort of other one long term. Okay, cool. That's functional. That'll at least get us to the point where Drixie can start experimenting with different colors and different setups. I'll do a little bit more work off camera, kind of just cleaning this up for safety purposes. I guess the easiest approach is to just make it so that edges won't appear in this list. If it has the file path edges, then it won't appear inside of a normal list, but it will appear during this list. Either that or I separate the prop options out. So we use the same JSON file, but it has two different lists for prop options. And one is prop options, one is edges options. Or I just make another JSON file for edge options, and instead of adding them all to the same list of IDs, it could have two different lists that it's running through. Or maybe even perhaps instead of piggybacking off of the create props button, there should be a completely separate button for process edges or something. Lots of options. Anyways, I'll find a way to make it clean. I do think it being integrated into the prop system is the right call. Just need to find a way to make it so that they're not overlapped so heavily and potentially causing errors just by misclicking. We're going to call it here. I'm hoping that next week we can move on to Chapter 2 and starting to set up some new rooms and some new flows, because I think Chapter 1 is in a good spot and ready to kind of get some playtest feedback and then come back to Chapter 1 based off of people's feedback. But I think I am expecting next week that we should finally be done with polish in Chapter 1 for the time being, and we can move on with building a new area, setting up some new props and creating some new spaces, and a new floor layout, which I'm excited to try and build Chapter 2, because Chapter 1 very much has to be a tutorial, but Chapter 2 I'm hoping I can take some of the training wheels off and do some more experimental stuff with the gameplay and the flow. Yeah, okay, cool. We're going to call it here for the night. We're not going to do any rating or anything. I don't want to bother people. People look busy. We're going to call it here. For now, though, this will be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.